There is a moment, and if you are honest with yourself, you may have already felt it when you realize that the life you spent decades building is beginning to ask less of you, not all at once, quietly. The way light shifts in a room without you noticing until suddenly the corner is dark. Maybe it was the morning you woke up with no particular place to be. Maybe it was the holiday when the table was smaller than it used to be. Maybe it was nothing dramatic at all, just a Tuesday afternoon that stretched longer than you expected. And somewhere in that silence, a thought surfaced that you did not quite know what to do with. What exactly am I holding on to? And why does letting go feel so frightening? Most people, when they think about growing older, imagine loneliness as the central fear, the empty rooms, the quiet phone, the friends who moved away or were lost to time. And yes, that is real. That weight is real. But I want to suggest that underneath loneliness, there is something older and quieter. Something most people never say out loud. It is not the fear of being alone, it is the fear of becoming someone who no longer matters. Someone who no longer contributes. Someone whose hands, which once held everything together, are no longer needed. You have spent a long time being needed, being useful, being the one who managed, organized, showed up, held it all. And now life is asking you to shift, and no one told you what you were supposed to shift into. This is not a video about accepting less, and it is not about pretending that what you are feeling is not real. Buddhist wisdom does not ask you to paste peace over pain. It asks something harder and more honest than that. It asks you to look clearly at what actually holds a life together and to release your grip on everything else. There are 5 things. Not 20, not a list of improvements. 5 things. And when you have them, something settles. Not because the world becomes easier, but because you stop fighting a battle that was never yours to win. I'm glad you're here. This is Quiet Wisdom, a space for the questions that matter most in the quieter chapters of life. Stay with me. 1. The body you still have. You did not think much about your knees when you were 40. That is not a criticism. It is simply true. When the body cooperates, it becomes invisible. A background hum you forget is even running. You got up, you moved through your day, you carried things, you drove. You walked into rooms and out of them without once having to think about what it took to do any of it. And then one morning, something shifts. Maybe it is gradual, a stiffness that takes longer to work out than it used to, a tiredness that arrives earlier in the evening. Maybe it is sharper, a fall, a diagnosis, a week in a hospital that reorders everything. Either way, the body steps out of the background and into the foreground, and suddenly you are thinking about your knees. Buddhist teaching has a word for this, Anicca: impermanence. The recognition that nothing material holds its form forever. Not the body, not the season, not the particular shape your life has taken up until now. This is not a pessimistic teaching. It is, in fact, a releasing one. Because when you understand impermanence not as a threat but as a description of how things actually work, you stop expecting the body to stay unchanged, and you begin to work with the body you have, rather than mourning the one you used to. But here is what the Buddhist teaching does not mean, and this matters. It does not mean surrender. It does not mean sitting quietly while your strength slips away without effort. Anicca describes what is true. It does not tell you to be passive in the face of it. Think of the body this way, not as a machine that is breaking down, and not as a project you are failing to maintain. Think of it as a home you have lived in for decades. A home you know intimately, where the floors creak, where the light comes through in the afternoon, which windows stick in the summer. You do not need it to be a new building. You do not need it to look like someone else's house. You need it to still be yours. Functional enough that you choose what happens inside it. Solid enough that you do not have to ask permission to move through your own rooms. There is a specific kind of loss that does not get talked about enough. It is not the loss of strength exactly. It is the loss of the ordinary small autonomies that strength makes possible. The ability to open a jar without asking for help, to carry your own groceries to the car, to decide to take a walk at 3 in the afternoon simply because you felt like it without needing to coordinate with anyone, without depending on anyone's schedule, without feeling like a burden before you have even put on your shoes. These are not dramatic freedoms, but they are the freedoms that constitute a life lived on your own terms, and their value is almost impossible to see clearly until they begin to recede. The Buddhist framing here is not about fighting time. It is about caring for what is still here with gratitude rather than with fear. Walking not because you are afraid of what happens if you stop, but because this body has carried you through everything you have lived, and it deserves to be cared for, the way you would care for something that matters. There is no perfection available at any age. There never was. What is available is tending, showing up for the body consistently, quietly, without drama, not to reclaim something lost, but to honor something still present. A body that is cared for is not something you show anyone. It is what keeps you the author of your own mornings. 2. Enough to breathe. Let me say this plainly, the way a close friend might say it, without softening it into something easier to hear. Financial stress does not get lighter with age. In many ways, it gets heavier. When you were younger, uncertainty had a different texture. Difficult, yes, but navigable. You could take on more work. You could start over. You had time in front of you as a resource. But when you are older, uncertainty lands differently. The margins feel smaller, the options feel fewer, and the particular fear that settles into a person who does not know whether their money will hold that fear is not abstract. It lives in the body. It keeps you awake at 2 in the morning, doing arithmetic that never quite adds up. In Buddhist teaching, dukkha is often translated as suffering, but that translation is a little too dramatic for what it actually describes. Dukkha is closer to the friction that comes from gripping too tightly, the persistent undercurrent of unease that runs beneath a life that cannot settle, and financial instability creates exactly this. Not always the acute pain of crisis, but the low, continuous hum of worry that prevents the mind from ever fully resting. There is a particular species of financial fear that belongs specifically to this chapter of life. It is not the fear of not having enough luxury. It is not the fear of missing out on things. It is quieter and more specific than that. It is the fear of becoming a burden, of having to call your child and say that you cannot cover something this month, of watching a medical bill arrive and feeling the floor shift slightly under you, of needing help and not being able to ask for it without shame. That fear, the fear of dependence, of losing the quiet dignity of being someone who manages their own affairs, is one of the heaviest things a person can carry. And it does not announce itself loudly. It just sits there, in the background, coloring everything. The teaching here is not about wealth. It is not about accumulation. Buddhist wisdom has very little interest in the size of your bank account. What it is interested in is the quality of your mind, and a mind that is perpetually calculating, perpetually anxious, perpetually braced for the next financial shock, is a mind that cannot be present, cannot rest, cannot receive the small pleasures of an ordinary day because it is too busy scanning for danger. Stability, even modest stability, changes this. Not because money buys happiness. That particular lie has been disproven by enough people who had a great deal of it and were miserable, but because predictability quiets the scanning. When you know that next month is covered, the mind has permission to be here now, to notice the afternoon light, to sit with a cup of tea without the arithmetic starting up again underneath it. This is why building something steady, not large, but dependable is not a material goal. It is a condition for peace. The The monk in the monastery does not worry about where his next meal is coming from, not because monks are wealthy, but because that particular uncertainty has been removed, and the mind is free to attend to what actually matters. The goal is not abundance. The goal is this: to be able to exhale. Peace does not come from having more. It comes from no longer having to count. 3. The rhythm that holds you. When people imagine retirement, they often imagine freedom as the absence of structure. No alarm, no calendar, no one telling you where to be and when. And for a while, a few weeks, perhaps a few months, that can feel like relief. But then something unexpected happens. The days begin to blur. Monday feels like Saturday. Morning slides into afternoon without anything distinguishing one from the other. And beneath that blurring, a quiet disorientation sets in. Not depression, exactly. Not sadness. Something more like the feeling of drifting, of being unmoored from time in a way that was supposed to feel like freedom, but instead feels like being slightly lost inside your own hours. This is not a personal failing. It is not weakness. It is what happens when structure disappears, because structure, as much as we resist it when it is imposed on us, is one of the ways the human mind orients itself in time. Take it away entirely, and the mind does not know where it is. It begins to loop, to ruminate, to lose its grip on what day it is, and then, more subtly, on what it is doing here. Buddhist teaching offers a concept that speaks directly to this. Wu Wei. It is often translated as effortless action or non-striving, and it gets misunderstood as passivity, as simply going limp and letting things happen. But that is not what it means. Wu Wei is about moving with life rather than against it, finding the natural current and following it rather than fighting upstream. It is about ease, not absence of movement. A simple daily rhythm is Wu Wei made practical, not a rigid schedule imposed from the outside, not a checklist to perform for an invisible audience, but a gentle pattern of your own design that gives the day a shape, a beginning, a sense of direction. Something as quiet as rising at a consistent time, moving the body in the morning, sitting with something warm before the world fully starts. A meal at a familiar hour. A walk. A task. A time for stillness. These are not accomplishments. They are not impressive. They are simply the banks of the river. Here is the image. A river does not flow freely because there are no banks. It flows because of the banks. Without them, there is no current, only water spreading in every direction, losing its force, pooling into something stagnant. Your daily rhythm is not the thing that constrains you. It is the thing that makes forward movement possible. And there is something else about routine that does not get said enough. It is not just about organizing your time. It is about stabilizing your emotions. When your day has a shape, your nervous system knows what to expect. There is less ambient anxiety, fewer moments of low-grade lostness. The mind, which can be relentless when given too much unstructured space, settles into the rhythm the way a body settles into a familiar chair. It recognizes where it is. It stops scanning. The mornings you tend to yourself most gently are often the mornings with the simplest structure, not the most productive, not the most eventful, just the ones where there was a shape to the hours, and you moved through it without resistance. And at the end of the day, something in you felt not accomplished, exactly, but continuous, still connected to yourself, still here. That continuity, over time, is what keeps the mind steady. It is not glamorous. It will not make a compelling story to tell anyone, but it is one of the quietest and most reliable forms of self-care available at any age. A routine is not what you do every day. It is what keeps you from losing yourself inside the days. 4. One thread forward. There is a kind of emptiness that is different from loneliness. Loneliness is the ache of wanting connection and not finding it. But this other emptiness, this one is quieter, and in some ways more difficult to name. It is the feeling of waking up and realizing that nothing is waiting for you. Nothing needs you today. Nothing is pulling you forward into the hours. It does not arrive dramatically. It does not announce itself. It comes in the weight of Tuesday mornings that feel exactly like Monday mornings, in afternoons that stretch without any particular direction, in the absence of anything you could honestly say you are looking forward to. And over time, that absence wears something down. Not your mood, exactly. Something more fundamental, your relationship to time itself. The Buddhist teaching of karma is usually misunderstood as a system of reward and punishment. Behave well, receive good things. Behave badly, receive bad things. But the more ancient and honest translation is simpler and more useful than that. Karma is seeds and conditions. Every action plants something. Every morning you step into, something small is planted. The harvest is not guaranteed. The timing is not yours to determine, but the planting that is always available to you. You do not need a grand purpose to plant a seed. You just need to plant one. There is a story, not a documented history, but the kind of story that holds something true about an old man named Kenji, who had tended the same garden for 40 years alongside his wife. When she died, he stopped going outside. Not out of dramatic grief, though the grief was immense. Simply because the garden had been theirs, and alone it felt like visiting somewhere that no longer quite existed. For weeks, he stayed indoors. The garden went unwatered. The plants began to fail. One morning, and he could not have told you why that morning, rather than any other, he noticed from the window that a small persimmon tree they had planted together years ago was dying. Just the one tree, and something in him, not hope, not healing, not any emotion, he could have named something simply practical, moved him to stand up, fill a watering can, and go outside. He watered the tree. It took perhaps 4 minutes. He went back inside. The next morning, he went to check on it. And the morning after that, he was not healed. He had not found meaning. He had not decided that life was worth living with grand philosophical clarity. He had simply found one thing that needed him on a specific morning, and he had answered it. And that one small thread, that 4-minute act of tending, had given him a reason to step outside, to step into the next day, and then the next. Months later, the tree survived, and Kenji had begun tending the rest of the garden again, not because he had resolved his grief, but because the habit of answering a small need had slowly, without drama, drawn him back into his own life. This is what the Buddhist teaching means by seeds and conditions. Kenji did not plant hope. He planted water, and conditions did the rest. The point is not what the reason is. It does not need to be impressive. It does not need to be spiritual. A book you are in the middle of, a plant that needs tending, a walk you take at the same time each morning and have come, without quite deciding to rely on. A grandchild you call on Thursdays, a series you are following, a project with no audience and no deadline that simply interests you. What matters is that it pulls you, that somewhere, in the direction of tomorrow, there is a small thread you are holding onto, not because the thread leads anywhere important, but because having it in your hand means you are still moving forward. The question many people in this chapter of life sit with and do not always say aloud is, what am I for now? The roles that once organized their sense of purpose have changed or ended. The career, the raising of children, the building of something, and when those structures fall away, the question underneath them surfaces, if I am not doing that anymore, who am I? Buddhist wisdom does not answer this question with a replacement role. It gently dissolves the question itself. You are not your function. You never were. A seed does not justify its existence by what it will eventually become. It is enough that it is planted. It is enough that it is tended. You do not need a reason that impresses anyone. You only need one that is enough to carry you through the door. 5. The truth in small numbers. At some point in the later years, the social world changes. Not because you have done anything wrong, not because you have become less interesting or less worthy of company, but simply because time does what time does. People move, relationships fade, some are lost entirely, and the wide circle that once surrounded you begins, quietly and without announcement, to grow smaller. If you measure your life by the number of people in it, this shrinking feels like loss. And it is loss, genuine loss, worth grieving honestly. But something else is happening at the same time. Something that only becomes visible once the noise of the larger circle quiets down. What remains often becomes more real. Not always, not automatically, but with enough attention, you begin to notice that the relationships which survived, the ones still standing after everything that has changed, have a different quality to them. A depth, a lack of performance. You do not have to explain yourself. You do not have to manage the impression you are making. You can sit in silence with this person, and the silence is comfortable rather than something to fill. You can say the true thing instead of the appropriate thing. You can be seen, not praised, not managed, not projected onto, simply seen as you actually are by someone who has known you long enough to look past the surface. When did someone last look at you that way? When did you last have a conversation where you did not feel the subtle pressure to present a certain version of yourself? When did the silence between you and another person last feel like rest rather than awkwardness? When did you last leave a conversation feeling lighter rather than more carefully assembled? These are not rhetorical questions. They are invitations to notice what kind of connection you actually have and what kind you are still hungry for. Metta, the Buddhist practice of loving kindness, is often described as sending goodwill outward, to friends, to strangers, to people you find difficult. But the teaching begins somewhere specific. It begins with yourself. Before you can extend genuine warmth toward another person, you must first cultivate something like warmth toward your own presence. Not self-congratulation, not performed self-love. Simply the quiet willingness to be in your own company without harshness. This matters for connection because how you treat yourself inside a relationship shapes what you are able to offer and receive within it. A person who is relentless with their own inner critic tends to hear criticism where none was intended. A person who cannot rest in their own presence cannot fully rest in another person's. The quality of your inner relationship becomes the floor of your outer ones. And here is something that often surprises people when they finally let themselves believe it. Deep connection does not require constant presence. It does not require daily contact or proximity or shared meals or any of the forms we typically associate with closeness. It requires truth. It requires the sense that when you are with this person, however rarely, however briefly, nothing needs to be hidden. You exist in that company without the work of pretending. One relationship like that carries more weight than a calendar full of pleasant, forgettable interactions. Not because quantity does not matter at all, it does, and loneliness is real, but because what the human heart is actually hungry for is not company. It is recognition, the feeling of being known. One person who truly sees you is worth more than 100 who simply know your name. 6. The longest relationship. Here is something true that most people spend a great deal of energy avoiding. The longest relationship you will ever have is with yourself. Every other relationship, however beloved, however central to your life, had a beginning that you can remember. Your relationship with yourself predates every one of them, and it will continue in some form through every loss, every transition, every night when everyone else has gone home, and it is just you. and the quiet, and whatever your mind decides to do with the silence. This is not a poetic observation. It has direct practical weight, because if that relationship is tense, if your own inner voice is harsh, relentless, critical, restless, then no amount of external company fully compensates for it. You can be in a room full of people who love you and still feel profoundly alone, because the loneliness is not coming from outside, it is coming from inside, from the fact that you have never quite learned to be comfortable with yourself. And for many people in this generation, people who were raised to be useful, to be productive, to earn their place through contribution, solitude was never something you were taught to inhabit. It was something to escape, to fill, to get through. The moment things got quiet, you reached for something: the television, the task, the phone, the drink, the busyness. Anything that filled the space before the space could fill with something uncomfortable. Buddhist teaching identifies this pattern with a concept called upadana, clinging. And one of the things people cling to most fiercely, without realizing they are doing it, is a version of life that is no longer here. A version where you were busier, more needed, more surrounded, where the silence never lasted long enough to become a problem. When that version of life ends, and it always ends, and the silence moves in, the clinging to what was creates a particular kind of suffering. Not because the silence itself is unbearable, but because you are measuring it against something that no longer exists and finding it lacking. The distinction that changes everything is the one between loneliness and solitude. They can look identical from the outside. Both involve being alone, but inside, they are different states entirely. Loneliness is the experience of absence of wanting connection and not having it, of feeling cut off from the world and from yourself. It is a form of pain, and it should be taken seriously as such. Solitude is something else. It is the experience of being in your own company, not as something to endure, but as something that has its own quality, its own texture, its own particular gifts. The writer who chooses to spend mornings alone, not because they have no one, but because in that aloneness something comes through. The elder who sits in the garden in the late afternoon, not passing time but inhabiting it. These are not people who have given up on connection. They are people who have made peace with their own presence and discovered that their own presence, fully inhabited, is not an empty thing. Think of the mind as a room that has never had its windows opened. Not because the outside is dangerous, not because there is no window, simply because the habit of opening it was never formed, because there was always too much noise inside, always another thing to attend to, always a reason to keep moving. And over time, the room becomes stuffy, restless, uncomfortable to spend time in, not because anything is wrong with the room, but because it has never been aired out. Learning to be in your own company, to sit with your own thoughts without immediately flinching away from them, to let feelings move through without having to manage them into something more acceptable. This is the airing out of the room. It does not happen all at once. It is not a dramatic transformation. It is a slow, patient practice of staying, of not immediately reaching for the remote or the phone or the next task the moment the silence starts to ask something of you. This does not mean you have to like solitude immediately. It does not mean you are required to find it beautiful. It only means this: stop treating your own company as something to escape from, because every time you flee the silence, you are telling yourself something that your inner world is a place too difficult to visit. And the longer you believe that, the more true it becomes. The moment you stop running is the moment the room begins to breathe. When you learn to stay with yourself, silence stops being the enemy. 7. What remains when everything falls away? There is a teaching in Buddhism called the second arrow. The first arrow is the pain that life delivers, the illness, the loss, the diminishment, the way the body slows, the way the circle narrows, the way certain mornings arrive heavy with the weight of everything that is no longer here. That pain is real. It is not to be minimized or explained away. The first arrow lands, and it hurts. The second arrow is the one we fire at ourselves. It is the story we tell about the first arrow, that it should not have landed, that something has gone terribly wrong, that we are being punished, that other people are spared this, that this particular pain means something about us, or about the fairness of things. It is the resistance to what is already here. And most of the suffering of aging, not the difficulty, but the suffering comes not from the first arrow, but from the second, not from what life is doing to us, but from the relentless commentary our minds run on top of what life is doing to us. The 5 things we have talked about in this video are not about preventing the first arrow. They are about lowering the bow before you fire the second one. A body that is cared for, not perfect, but tended, does not eliminate the limitations of age, but it removes the extra suffering of having neglected what was still available to care for. A modest, stable income does not remove uncertainty from life, but it removes the particular torment of financial anxiety that runs underneath everything else and prevents the mind from ever fully resting. A simple daily rhythm does not make every day meaningful in some grand sense, but it prevents the mind from drifting into the formless fog of unstructured time, which is one of the quieter cruelties of later life when no one warns you about it. One small thread forward, one thing that needs you, one thing you are moving toward does not restore the sense of purpose that earlier chapters of life provided, but it keeps the door to tomorrow from feeling completely sealed. And a practiced capacity for your own company, for the silence, for the inner world, for the relationship with yourself that no one else can enter, does not make you immune to loneliness. But it means that solitude, when it comes, is a room you know how to inhabit, rather than a place you have never learned to navigate. Together, these 5 things are not a formula for a perfect old age. There is no such thing. They are not a guarantee that the later years will be easy or painless or free of grief. They are something quieter and more honest than that. They are the recognition that a life does not need to be large to be full. That fullness, real fullness, the kind that does not depend on performance or accumulation or the presence of particular people, comes from a different direction entirely. It comes from the direction of less, from releasing the grip on things that were never really holding you up anyway. From discovering, in the space that opens when you stop clutching, that what was always underneath the body, the breath, the simple rhythm of days, the one thread, the one true witness, the ability to sit quietly inside your own existence was enough, has always been enough. The Buddhist teacher Ajahn Chah once said, "If you let go a little, you will have a little peace. If you let go a lot, you will have a lot of peace. If you let go completely, you will have complete peace." The 5 things we have talked about today are not things to acquire. They are conditions that make letting go possible. They are what remains when you stop trying to hold everything and find that what is still in your hands is exactly what you needed. Aging does not take away your life. It takes away what you never truly needed to begin with. Do you remember the question from the beginning? What am I holding on to? And why does letting go feel so frightening? I want to offer a different framing now. Not an answer, but a reframe. The hands that grip tightly are tired hands. And you have been gripping for a long time, not because you are a fearful person, but because life asked you to hold so much, for so long, that holding became your default. Your first response to uncertainty, your protection against the feeling of things slipping away. But here is what I want you to sit with. What if nothing is slipping away? What if what feels like loss is actually the beginning of something lighter? Somewhere in the next few days, there will be a moment, probably small, probably unremarkable, when you are simply present in your own life. Maybe a cup of tea in the morning before anything is required of you. Maybe a few minutes outside with no particular destination. Maybe just sitting, actually sitting, not waiting for the next thing, and feeling, beneath all the noise that usually fills those spaces, something quiet and steady and already here. That is the thing the 5 pillars are for. Not to build a better life from the outside in, but to clear enough space that you can finally feel what has been here all along. You are not behind. You have not missed the window. And you do not need to become anyone other than who you are, right now, in this chapter. If something in this video opened a door even slightly, I hope you'll subscribe to Quiet Wisdom. This is the space we have built for exactly these conversations. Hit the like button if something landed. And if someone in your life is carrying something heavy right now, quietly and without much help, share this with them. It might be the thing they needed to hear today. And in the comments, I would love to know, of these 5 things, which one do you feel you already have, and which one feels furthest away right now? I read every comment, I mean that. Take care of yourself. I will see you in the next one.